Welcome to the Directions Mag Geoinspirations podcast series with Joseph Kerski.
Well, greetings all. Welcome to another edition of the Geoinspirations podcast series, where we feature a number of fascinating people that are in some sort of aspect of geospatial technology, education, GIS, environmental science, geography, etc. I'm so thrilled today because I have one of my all-time favorite people and one of the true pioneers in GIS education, Anita Palmer. Anita, welcome.
Well, hello, Joseph. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Oh gosh, this has been a long time dream of mine. I was looking at all of the amazing, wonderful people we've had in this podcast and text series over the past 6 or 7 years now, and I'm thinking, why isn't Anita Palmer in here? Now, I think a lot of people know who you are, but for the benefit of the listener, if you could describe what's your current position, or maybe in your case, positions, and a little bit about the journey that we can dig this into deeper detail in a bit, but your journey into these positions.
Well, okay, Joseph, here we go. You know, when you asked me to do this, I was like, why is he asking me, for Pete's sakes? This is, I'm not a GIS professional, but I do have a certain passion for geospatial education. And what I'm doing right now is that I am a geospatial education consultant, and I have been since probably about 2001 actually is when I became a full-time consultant. Where I am today is that I am working with National Geographic on their second edition, if you will, Mapmaker or Mapmaker 2, helping them realize that for the classroom. And we can talk some more about that. I am also working with Cengage. I started about 18 months ago, a book publisher, creating GIS activities, brief GIS activities to go along with the chapters. So for instance, the book that we finished about 18 months ago was their new AP Human Geography, so Advanced Placement Human Geography. And I wrote 2 activities for each unit, and they're encompassed in a story map. And so it is a seamless, simple way for teachers to integrate GIS into the use of that particular textbook. I'm working on several others at the moment, and I'll just leave it at that. There are more textbooks to come. And then I am also working on a project with another fellow, because I started my relationship with National Geographic Mapmaker as a fellow in 2019, and then they picked me up after my fellowship year was extended in 2020. They picked me up as a consultant over the last year. With that, I met another fellow by the name of Ashley Lamb Sinclair, and she came up with this notion of really working with wayfinders in communities to capture and create stories of social justice and within their communities. So it is called 2892. And all I am doing is actually putting that into story map form. So telling the stories of these communities. The first community we worked on was Louisville. And we've now also done some other communities as well. So they'll be coming out the first of the year of 2022. And I'm pretty excited about that, for that vision and for these folks to be able to tell their stories. That's what I'm doing currently. And that's now probably everybody's yawning, you know.
No, it's fascinating because you're at this intersection of science, social studies, lots of different disciplines in education, but also you've got this thread running through your entire career of being passionate about space, place, storytelling, geotechnologies to enable all those things to happen. So that's something we'll pick out. How did that thread get birthed in your passion for education, and why is that thread such a meaningful aspect to kind of connecting everything that you do, this spatial aspect?
All right. So let's go back in the day, the 90s. I was actually working for a certified public accountant. So I was in an accounting firm, and you remember, Joseph, when the PCs first started coming out, right? Mm-hmm. And you remember the first luggable, and it was this massive, and it had 20 megabytes of RAM, and it was like, woo, this is a big deal. So I was taking that technology and helping the accounting clients to actually begin to integrate technology into their offices, into their work. And so that's how it started. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I was actually even connecting hardware, wiring, and all of that. So with that all being said, I was doing that. And I was also working with teenagers in the community. And I was like, I love this. I love this technology thing. Don't know where it's going, but I love it. And I love working with these kids. And so I was like, you know what? I wanted to be a teacher actually when I graduated from high school, but I thought, the teachers, there were so many teachers, I was never going to be able to get a job. So I went to physical therapy instead. Most people don't know that. But anyway, that's where I headed.
I did not know that.
You did not know that. But
Anita, I've got this knee issue. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk later.
Well, between your knee issue and my knee issue, we'll be, So anyway, so I started thinking, this is early 90s, late 80s, actually. And I'm like, I want to go back to school and I want to get my teaching credential. So I did. So there's where it started, right? So I think it was like 88. 89. That's where I went back to school, started working on my teaching credential. And I met a woman by the name of Jackie Kinnick. And I think you've run into Jackie in Colorado, but we were in Washoe County, Reno, Nevada. And Jackie and I were in classes together, and her husband, Kyle, was in Kyle Anderson. He was in the GIS department for Washoe County. And he kept telling her, Jackie, you need to have this GIS thing in the classroom, because he knew Jackie was heading to the classroom as well. And Jackie and I have become friends. And so she kept telling me, so she was infusing me with Kyle's enthusiasm. And she had also run into this man by the name of Charlie Fitzpatrick. And she said, you need to reach out to this guy. So it was like 93. I wrote to Charlie. We started communicating via, I think we actually had email. Charlie was able to introduce me to another Esri representative, and they were able to get me software for the classroom.
ArcView 3, ArcView 2, whatever it was.
It was 1.
ArcView 1, oh my.
I think. And we were early before we got to the formal 3.0. So anyway, Jackie managed to get a grant, et cetera. Then in 95, I believe it was in 95, Jackie and I were invited to a 2-day education workshop. And I think it was the first one. It was in Palm Springs when the user conference was still in Palm Springs. And so we went for 2 days and just were immersed. And there we got to actually meet Charlie Fitzpatrick face-to-face, and George Daly, and Angie Lee had just been hired. So my team, right, we're beginning to get this, beginning to meet folks. It was such an exciting weekend. And Jackie and I just took it and ran with it. So in the process, I decided to pursue my master's degree in geography with an emphasis in GIS, as much as you could emphasize GIS at the time. And so that is basically how those are the seeds. But did you want to jump in, Joseph, or you want me to keep going?
Well, I was going to say that, again, when you were doing this, just for the benefit of folks that are sort of newly into GIS or thinking about going into GIS and realizing there's so many things you could do within 5 minutes that, you've got instant web maps and apps. This was in the kind of the clunky, this was the clunky days. It was very difficult to get the images registered to your vectors and just to get the software installed. And So Anita and these other folks that she's mentioning, they were the pioneers blazing the trail to make it easier for the rest of folks listening to this to be able to do what they're doing. And this all didn't just happen to me overnight. This was years of blazing trails. So again, saluting you, Anita, for the countless hours getting this stuff to actually work, not just on the technology side, but then how do I teach this effectively? How do I, which I know you're going to get into, the how you integrate it into your classrooms and then in your consultancy.
I think back, and I had just these amazing students. So we had, when I first went to teach at Carson High School, they had a Mac lab, not a Mac lab, excuse me. They were apples. There were no Macs then. That was it. And then we got, they hired me to teach typing, but they had 20 computers that they had gotten in a grant. And the teacher had, I don't know, subsequently retired. So they were all sitting in the boxes. So I brought those in, and I didn't have enough. So I'm like, I'm not teaching typing. Let's teach keyboarding. That's how it started. And so we started that. And then I got a bunch of donated computers. Well, that was because I had 30 kids in the class, and 10 kids were on typewriters and the other 20, So anyway, so we kick it off with that. And these kids get so excited about it. And so then I start getting all this other software. And I'm like, okay, the GIS software. There were all of these other kinds of things like animation. Oh, let's teach animation. Oh, let's teach, there was no Word. There was no Microsoft products then. It was WordPerfect. Remember that came out?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And Lotus, 1, 2, 3. So, okay, well, let's teach that. Well, then you throw GIS into the mix. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to go a little crazy. So I gave the kids the software, and I said, kids, you got to install this stuff, and you have to figure out how to kick this thing off. And that's really how how I taught was. I was so busy teaching so many things with the technologies that were not up to the software. They hadn't caught up with the software, so we have that whole thing going on of the software being really, especially the GIS software, being beyond where the computers were, and then finally the computers would catch up, and then the software would have to, so we were doing that back and forth. So I gave it to the kids and I said, load these. I remember it was Ryan and Jared. And I had girls, and that was wonderful because I was kind of one of the first female technology teachers. So I was bringing on, girls were like, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And so I had classes with all these girls in them, which was amazing. So don't let me forget to tell you about my Hispanic Girls Project. So the kids installed the software, and you know what they were using? ArcInfo.
Wow.
And at the same time, in my master's program, I was using ArcInfo, but Charlie had, so I had ArcInfo because remember, it was like 95, 97. So it was so early. So I was in my master's program, and I was like, well, this ArcInfo is not going to work so well for the broader group of kids right now. My computers can't really handle it, this, that. So I have them using ArcView. Can I just use ArcView in my master's? And they were like, okay, why not? So you experiment with that. And so at the same time I was doing that. So that's just kind of a little aside. I don't know if you knew that as well.
No,
so,
fascinating.
So we were bringing this GIS thing, and the kids started doing crazy stuff like bird monitoring. I would just say, oh, come up with anything. Tell me. And then we found out that they were going to, in the city, they were going to tear a historical building down. Some of the historical outbuildings, not the historical building itself, but some of the outbuildings. And before the outbuildings were torn down, I was able to take all the kids over, and we had GPS units and the, software, and the kids were there, and they were recording everything they found in these outbuildings, et cetera. And they were able for the city to map And I mean, mind you, this was like 97, maybe. And they were able to map this whole area before the outbuildings had to go and it became a parking lot, but they were able to restore the main building. So that was pretty exciting. And so for the city, the museum, they were able to actually create those first maps for the community.
There are lots of nice threads in here. First of all, your longstanding love for getting students out into the field and actually working on real world community projects that people actually care about that will make an impact farther than the classroom walls. So that's commendable that you had that vision even back then. At some point in the discussion today, if you could talk about, how you've brought that forward. Another thing that your comments reminded me of, with changes in technology, the first projector that I brought to a presentation, it was on a rolling cart. It was so heavy you couldn't really lift it. It was in a rolling cart.
Yeah.
And then I would set it up, and it had like 3 red, green, blue lamps in it, and it was fascinating. But it was like, wow, I can do this anywhere with this projector. Right. I can present whatever I want on the computer to a big audience. Wow, what a concept. Before we get too far though, talk about those girls that you had, those young women in the class, the Hispanic girls, and why that made such an impact on your career, but also to their lives.
One of the technology classes I taught was AutoCAD. And I would get Carson City, because of its placement and because of the tourism industry, we had about 20% population of Hispanics, and they were migrating from Mexico and Central American countries. And many of them, of course, spoke English, but parents did not. There was still a real cultural divide, if you will. Divide's probably the wrong word, but where the girls would have to stay home and take care of the younger siblings if the parents had to go to work or what have you. So, we had this tension, built-in tension, but the girls were all so bright and so eager to learn. And so I was constantly having these girls come in during lunch or after school or before school. And then I started I was given permission to actually teach GIS. Real GIS classes, which I kind of blended with the AutoCAD at times. So the girls that I had been meeting through AutoCAD, they were really, really excited about it. And so there was a grant from National Science Foundation, so an NSF grant, that it was some of the early research that National Science Foundation was doing on. NSF was doing some of their early research on how to keep girls into the science trajectory. They found that they were losing girls around middle school. They became less interested in science and they would fall off the science, wanting to learn science. And so that was the whole goal of that original grant. The original studies that they were doing, et cetera, was for science, math, engineering, and technology. And the acronym was SMET. SMET that did become STEM, by the way. But that was the early, the origins at NSF in really trying to promote STEM fields and STEM learning. I had a grant, I applied for this grant for my Hispanic girls to provide some things like, let me get them to not take them out of other classes. So we had a 7 a.m. start on the class. We sent buses to pick them up. So they were able to get to school for that 7 o'clock start. I had a Hispanic aide. She was very young. I think she was maybe 21 or 22, and she was bilingual and absolutely wonderful. Then the other tenet was we would provide English language learning at the same time so that the girls can become really proficient in speaking English and Spanish. So they would truly be bilingual. The girls went nuts over this. It was absolutely one of the most fun, inspirational classes that I had. And trust me, I was inspired every day by my students. They were so excited about being able to actually see on a virtual map, a digital map, where they came from. We went ahead and we connected it to where they came from, where they were, and what they could do with that, where they were going. And so we had a year-long class. And what we saw, that by that point in time, I was in the high-tech center that was still on our campus at Carson High School, but we shared it with the community college. So we were in that campus. The girls would bring other kids. So they were bringing the boys. They were teaching them English during their off periods because we had English language learning software, et cetera, and they were teaching them GIS. And so they were doing this out in the, in our computing area. So it was very, very inspiring. Every single one of the girls in my program graduated from high school. I still am on Facebook with a couple of them. In fact, going to try and go down in January and have dinner with one of the gals whose twin daughters just graduated from high school. So anyway, I mean, I'm just so excited. That program, I'm not really doing it justice, but that program was inspiring and inspired the entire school, and the community was so excited. The senator, our state senator, got involved in helping the girls and their families. And it was just such a privilege.
I was actually going to ask you later on, what's one of the projects that you feel most proud to be involved with? And that's got to rank, I know, pretty highly in your list, since you're already mentioning it. Another thing that I just want to remind the listeners of, just the impact that one teacher can have, like you, Ms. Palmer. And I'd also remind people that I conducted an interview with Eric Bushland down in Texas, and the work that he's doing with the students there at Saxe High School. And there are a couple of others in this library that you might want to be mindful of and take a listen to or read, as the case may be. But yes, I love that story. I actually taught with you in that community college / high school innovations tech center. Yes. That was a joy.
It was. And funny you should mention this, Joseph. So if you give me just a moment. So I kind of diverted, but anybody who knows me knows that I am not terribly linear when it comes to my communication methods, shall we say. So I started telling you a little bit about what was happening back in the late 80s, the 90s, et cetera. So in 98, Esri, along with National Geographic, if I'm recalling this correctly, had a workshop for 32 teachers in North America. So there were a couple of Canadian teachers. And we all met down at Texas State University, San Marcos. Mm-hmm. And I met some people. So I already knew Charlie Fitzpatrick, George Daly, and Angie Lee, but I met some other folks. One by the name of Joseph Kerski. He was on staff, and there were some others. Of course, Joseph is so amazing now, but trust me, he was just as amazing then. So
that was very memorable, because we had 3 weeks. As I recall, 2 or 3 weeks.
It was like 17 days.
And we kept the educators there, and Anita and others were very patient, but we had morning, afternoon, and evening sessions.
Oh, yes.
And after 6 days, some of the teachers came to us and said, we have to have a break.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, okay. So we, Sunday, everybody went into the field and kind of did their own thing, but it was a testimony to your tenacity, and it was blazing hot down there. And so one of the things that we said to the educators was, okay, we'll get through this earthquakes activity or whatever activity we're working on, and then we'll get to float in the San Marcos River. That was we get to float the river if we get through this activity.
Absolutely.
All right, continue on.
So we met Joseph, and I met Sarah Bednarz, So you're asking me for, mentors. So she's definitely my geography mentor. Kay Daly was the principal and head administrator for a school by the name of Bishop Dunn in Dallas. Catherine Kiernan was on your team as well. And then I met a whole lot of other teachers. And then markedly, I met another teacher whom everybody thought it was rather cute because his name is Roger Palmer. I was not Palmer at the time. I was Anita Brooks. And both of us were the only two single teachers of the 32. Both of us laugh a lot. And I think everybody just thought it was, oh, well. And so there was definitely some machination there to have the two laughing single people be matched up at a computer because we had to share a computer. So we had 16 computers, 32.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And so I still have all of those materials, but that was one of the most inspirational 2 weeks of just this in-depth, immersed GIS in education. And that was at the start of a relationship with Joseph. And so Joseph and Roger and I, so that has been such an important part of our lives since 98. So the next year, Esri had another scaled back, but it was for teaching and outreach. And we met another guy by the name of Tom Baker. So for those of you who know, Tom Baker, Joseph Kerski, Charlie, George, Angie, that was the education team at Esri forever. Now there've been, George has retired since, et cetera. But what that did for us is Joseph and Roger and I cooked up this notion of let's go out and let's do week-long trainings. And so we did. For 5 years, we did week-long trainings. And we started, the first one was in Carson City during the summer. We have such actually, we could do an outtake seminar because we have an outtake interview here because we have such funny things that we can tell you, but I'm gonna hold myself back. So we started and then we started moving around Colorado the following summers. What that did was really, it got teachers very excited. It gave them an opportunity to have that same immersed experience that we did in Texas during those hot summers. And, but it also, I was deep into my master's at that time. It also gave Joseph and Tom and I this notion of, and actually Tom and Joseph were helping me to really articulate what was happening, what was happening with those teachers by the time we were done with that week-long training. What were they doing? Were they using the GIS in their classrooms afterwards? So we went back and we did a research survey and wrote a paper on that. But we found out that indeed it did make a difference, that these trainings and GIS did make a difference in their classrooms, but they needed more. As an aside, so Joseph and Roger and I, and then we would occasionally have some other folks like Patrick Wigand from England. And he came in one summer and was there with us and helped us. But we literally, the first couple of times, summers, I think we counted, we had 9 hours of sleep or some silly thing in 7 days.
We don't advocate that for a good work-life balance, folks. We're not advocating that here, but yes, just to show how intent we all were about this.
We were writing materials. I mean, on the fly.
In the evenings to prepare for the next day. Yep.
What that gave us was we really thought we needed proper materials. In 2001, was able to promote a book idea to Esri. And Jack Dangerman, George, I think George and Charlie promoted it to Jack. Jack said, okay, we'll do it. And so we got together. I reached out to a couple of other teachers, Lynn Malone and Christine Voigt, and who had been using GIS in their classrooms. And we got together and came up with a book. Everybody was there. I mean, the whole education team. And I mean, there were other people involved from Esri as well. But the book was birthed and it was called Mapping Our World.
Mm-hmm.
And that truly was one of my, I mean, that is such a tender memory for me. 530 pages. And it was, 4 desktop,
Oh, yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
software in there to install, but it was the first book of its kind. And it was a bestseller for Esri Press. I mean, it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a, I was so proud of that. And so that really started off some of the projects that really, I feel, very much fill my heart. And with that, then we would do the next, Our World came from the Mapping Our World, and that became 4 books. And Catherine came in and she wrote the 4th one, the making spatial decisions, I think. So we divided Mapping Our World into 2 books. Then we also had an elementary book that a group did, and then Catherine came in and did that 4th book. So that really birthed that next whole section of that. So then the next phase, if you were going to ask me, what other projects would I be proud of?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that Tom approached Roger Palmer. Oh, by the way, somewhere
you didn't
in there,
follow for the benefit of the listener, the connection.
So Roger and I met in 98, as I said. We started a business, actually. And originally it was called Educational Technology Consultants. And I started that in Carson City. And Roger and I, along, with Joseph, we would travel and we would do these trainings. And so that was kind of entrenched in this business. And so Roger and I would, travel to different places. We would do trainings, etc. And he was a teacher in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And then at some point he proposed, and 3 years later we were married. So anyway, in 2001, on September 1st, we were married. So anyway,
I love that story too. Anita and I oftentimes when we teach together, we say, okay, take a close look at the other people in the Institute. You may be connected with them in the future in some meaningful way that you're not anticipating right now.
You never
know.
So
GIS brings people together in lots of ways.
Well, and that's one of our favorites. I think all of us say GIS brings people together.
Oh gosh, that is wonderful. And as you're saying, on the innovations, the Mapping Our World book, the Our World book, the institutes leading through the T3G, the geo inquiries. I mean, so much of that energy, the institutes, the curricular items, the community really is ultimately the what got built. The education community that still thrives today and is ever expanding, with new teachers coming on board and so on. That all came from all these things that Anita is sharing. So now you folks see why I really wanted to have Anita on here, sharing not just the, what happened in the birth of all this, but why it all matters today. Yeah. Which kind of leads me to asking you, Anita, given your experience in this area in many ways, I mean, you're uniquely positioned. You've touched so many lives, university, community college, high school, middle school, elementary, educators of all levels and in all disciplines, really. History, geography. I mean, we're working together on this DUville University project where it's social studies focused, but you've worked with STEM and ICT. Given all of your experience, and you've worked with GIS professionals as well. So all this leads me to ask you, what do you think we need to be doing as the GIS, geospatial education, STEM education community, as we look forward to, okay, what impact should we be making? Where should we focus our efforts in the remainder of the 2020s, let's just say? What do you think we should do?
As you gave me some thought-provoking questions beforehand, I was talking to Roger, and he's so, we are so enmeshed in the last 23 years of GIS education. So I said, I kind of asked him the same question. I said, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to do? And he said the same thing that came to my mind, which was we need to embed GIS into more classes. And I'm going to be bold and say we need to embed GIS into every class in K-12 so that it becomes ubiquitous. So of course we're going to use digital mapping. Of course we're going to use, and not solely, I'm sorry, I'm going to say something that's a tiny bit politically fraught, not solely Google Earth, or Google. I'm a Google user. Absolutely. I will go to a Google map and it's a wonderful product, but I want to have kids be able to do analysis. I want them to be thinking about, I'm going to turn some layers on and I want to do some analysis because I want to see what's closest and what are the factors that are driving what's going on. So I think to do that, which is why I am so really excited about the projects that I'm working on right now, is MapMaker. Okay, let's take that. I think will be an absolutely game changer and wonderful product to get all these beginning teachers. They're not beginning teachers necessarily, but they're beginning to use maps, or they're not using maps. Those are this population. We want to have them wake up and have it be so simple that they can come in and they can readily use a map in their classroom. So MapMaker, just let's get the groundswell to come up from underneath. And then to be able to have textbooks that have, that of course you're going to have GIS activities for every unit in there, and that kids are going to be able to have another look at a map. It's not solely a printed map in the book, or a map snippet. They can actually explore that map and even explore the map for 3000 BCE. I think we need to infuse every content area with geospatial learning and geospatial tools. That's still a heavy lift. That teachers are exhausted. They have so much already. However, that's my job. I think that's our job, is to make it accessible and make it totally that, of course, I would do this in my classroom because it's there. It's ready for me. I get it. That's where I am right now. And so that would be one of my goals, is to see GIS infused across K-12 curricula.
Every discipline asks, or should ask, the whys of where, even mathematics, history, digital humanities, etc. So I love what you're saying. Could you let the listener know just ever so briefly how MapMaker is positioned in your way of thinking with the whole progression of using geospatial technologies, and how is it different from ArcGIS Online, let's say? Sure.
Honestly, MapMaker is a basic tool. It is for the basics. We're trying to come up with the basic materials and content that folks can use. So it's just meant to be ultra simple and ultra accessible. So then what we see is that if you can imagine an on-ramp, a ramp up, MapMaker is at the base. So it's the basics of that, and where we're getting teachers excited about geospatial. And then what will happen, Joseph? They'll be going, oh, I want my students to collect data. I want my students to make their own maps and create their own layers. MapMaker is not made to do that. So we're trying to provide and figure out and ideate how to make a seamless trajectory, a seamless road from MapMaker to ArcGIS Online. So they are not at odds with each other at all. They are part of a seamless progression. And that is, that's the goal, is that, we really get this groundswell of teachers excited about geospatial and geospatial learning. And then the kids will drive it from there.
Good point. And you've got a link to MapMaker in the resources that you provided. So thank you for that. Okay, what about this, Anita? This has been wonderful. And I know that you've got a zillion things that you probably need to do today, but it's really great for you to spend time with us talking about, the journey, why this all matters. Let's say a person listening to this is a geospatial professional. They like what you're saying. That resonates. They've got kids. They know people with kids. Maybe they serve as an adjunct in a community college, or whatever. They're involved with education, or they're passionate about education in some way, but they don't know what next step they could maybe take to be more fully involved, because maybe their day-to-day work is working on parcels or water lines or something like that in their municipality or private company or whatever. How could they get involved with promoting what you're talking about here in schools or colleges?
If they had no GIS, I would say my first thing would be to find a mentor. But this particular audience is different. This is your geospatial audience. They have that. I'd still say find an education mentor. Find somebody that, and if that means it's reaching out to Joseph to say, Joseph, point me to the organization, get me connected with Anita. And that's what I do, is that when people reach out to me, I connect them up with somebody in their area, an educator in their area, or what have you. It's so very informal. But we have our community is very informal. It's becoming a wider and deeper. But honestly, all of us have to put, I'll send an email out to a group of people and say, hey, do you know somebody in Iowa? And then, invariably Joseph or Tom or whomever will say, yeah, so-and-so is over there. And then we do an introduction. And it's that informal, but honestly, I think it's just essential to take a deep breath and say, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to call for help.
It touches on the whole aspect of the geospatial community, that we actually do care about people, and we want to connect people, and we want to help people in their own journey. And also we care about the planet. So we don't just talk about, watersheds and biomes and ecoregions and things. We actually do care about all those things. So can you think of any time that you've asked in earnest someone in this field for assistance with education or data or, something, technical assistance, and they've said, no, I refuse? I can't think of. They may say, well, I don't know, but I can help you find someone who does know the answer to the question. But it is a very kind of it's the people. And that's why I love this GeoInspirations column, because it shows, like Anita Palmer here, folks, that there are people that if you get stuck in your journey or a technical issue or whatever it is, that this community actually does care about you, and we want you to succeed.
Right.
What about this, Anita? This is something I didn't actually prepare you for, but you've got this there's not that many independent consultants in geospatial, especially in education, but even in general, there's not that many folks that have carved out this pathway like you have. So let's say someone is really interested. Gosh, I love what Anita's doing. Understanding that there's probably lots of challenges to being an independent consultant, but do you have any advice for someone that's I really want to do something in geospatial that I'm my own boss, I'm my own independent consultancy? How do I do that? Do you have any words of encouragement? I mean, I'm sure there are lots of positive benefits as you've shared with us, but there's probably lots of challenges behind the scenes as well. And probably we don't have time to get into all those challenges, but what would you say to someone that says, I want to be an independent consultant like Anita?
It is a business. It is the fun part is not the only part I get to do. So there is the other part of this that is, thankfully it's a podcast, so you can't see the amount of paper on both sides of my desk, and you can't see the 3 monitors with way too many screens open. I will tell you, it's prepare yourself for a bit of a cacophony of information and things to do. And it's really something. If you're up to it if you are ready to be bold, say, I'm going to make a difference in this way, because I know you're making a difference with what you're doing already. That's not the issue. But the issue is, I want to make a difference in this with kids and teachers and education. Then I'll put it to you again. It's write to me and tell me what you want to do, and I will help you. I will. It's what I do. I love to help others. I love to mentor others. And I've done it certainly a handful of times, gotten other folks off and starting their own business. It's not easy, but it is worth it.
All right, Anita. I can't think of any better way to end that with an encouraging word from you, and also stick with it, hard work, keep the end goals in mind, that you are making a positive difference in the planet and in people's lives. This is so wonderful, Anita. Thanks so much for being with us today. I know there's a lot more we could probably be saying. We should probably have an episode 2 of Anita Palmer.
Oh, please, Joseph.
Let's think about that for the future. But again, I know that the listeners of this will really benefit from all of the words of wisdom and the vision that you've shared. And I just wish you all the best in the future. Looking forward to further collaborations with you, but all continued success to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joseph. Thanks so much.